Well, bienvenue, welcome one and all to a live stream devoted to the gentle art of working out what the hell's going on within cladding in today's property industry. I'm joined, of course, by Hamish McClay of Search and Convey, and of course, Silas Jaylees of Wiggy Wham. Now, Silas is out and about in between meetings, and he's thankfully found time that he can share with us today. Today's topic is, as usual, an interesting one, and hopefully will ruffle some feathers. Should councils ban builders who leave residents exposed? And of course, this comes in the wake of one of the best known of these certain well-known big bad builders, Barratt, who have been now pronounced as being the master builder. Should they be banned? Hamish, let's start off with you.
I felt it a worthy topic because this follows on. I mean, one of the comments which was little read into the Grenfell report was the fact that the council itself, where Grenfell Towers happened to be, that's the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, they banned the contractors who they considered of being responsible for adding to the fire risk of Grenfell, which actually brought about what happened. I think the sad aspect of what has happened with Grenfell, we know it's taken an inordinate amount of time. It's taken 7 years to get where we've got to. No finger has been pointed at individuals responsible for the companies who brought about this because of whether it be shoddy workmanship, whether it be using wrong materials, all sorts of different things. So we haven't got the building companies themselves who actually were responsible for bringing this about. But I just wondered, in the wake of that decision about contractors, is that possibly something that we could actually be sort of taken up in due course? Now, we know that Steve, he's campaigning at the moment on several fronts. We know he's supporting Earl of Lytton's building safety scheme. We know also he's campaigning to get onto the council, where they're short of a candidate. So he's actually sort of going there, and I'm just actually checking up. I can't quite remember whereabouts it is. No, but he's campaigning anyway to become.
Yes, but he's put, the old expression, put up or shut up, as in put up your dukes, and he's put up his dukes. He's decided he's going to join the good fight, and I commend him for it.
Well, if we can get involved with the planning decisions within the council that contains Royal Artillery Quays, because that is part of what the challenge is. Certain things are being passed. So basically, it is a question. Is this something which could be brought about? The actual banning of builders, the banning of those responsible who haven't actually done anything about it in those particular areas where the work needs to be done. And I think, it's not a difficult decision to actually sort of make, because Barratt's are totally responsible for the building of Royal Artillery Quays, and they're actually responsible for any remediation being carried out, whoever they choose to employ to do it. They've got control or lack of control of the situation as it stands.
Well, it seems to me be a matter of public note that they conspicuously were remiss in their building of Royal Artillery Quays, if we can use that example, in the first place. It's literally has been written down, decreed, spoken of in the chamber even, and yet they've been upgraded to becoming master builders. Silas, this seems to be absolute painted nonsense.
Well, it does seem to be, Gareth, and I think there's a challenge here, which is the awareness, as you quite rightly point out. We are very much aware as our collective group here around the problems that Barratt are delivering in their buildings, because we've been made aware. We've looked at the statistics, and the statistics point to the fact that a significant number of their buildings, more than 50%, appear to be detrimental to human health. And the thing that's going through my mind is I wonder whether the local authorities actually have that same level of education and same level of understanding, because if they do and they're still allowing them to go ahead and build these dangerous buildings, well, you've got to then say where does the responsibility lie?
But aren't we sleepwalking into a national disaster? It's because Barretts apparently are not the worst. There are some builders that 75% of their buildings are technically uninhabitable.
Well, this is a great question again, because you have to look at where are we going in terms of the government targets. If the government is very serious about building all of these houses, are they just going to turn a blind eye to bad practice in order to meet numbers and get a PR piece out of it? But actually leaving problems for future generations to deal with. And I do wonder, and I do worry, whether that is actually part of what's actually going to be the problem unfolding in the future, because we saw that very 60s.
I know there are millions of flats out there with these cladding issues on it, and it would appear to me, and I may be wrong, that it's probably cheaper to remedy them, to take the stuff off and make good, than build from scratch. And we've got, if we took all those many flats, thousands of them around the country, made them habitable and made them available for public housing, we could supplant a good portion of that desired minimum housing creation, could we not?
I agree with you completely. Yes, we could. There seems to be this hesitancy and resistance, and it is coming from the developers to hold their hands up and say this is what we've done and this is what we've done wrong, because of the cost, and it's their cost to fix it. But I do wonder whether, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, is it the lies, damn lies and statistics speech that he made, where if we look at what they may be looking at, which is we have 24 million housing units in the UK, and only a proportion of them actually go up in flames every year. Is that an acceptable risk compared to, having to remedy the situation? I don't know. That might be the data that they're using to justify these awful decisions of allowing these detrimental materials to remain in place. It's the only thing that makes any logical sense to me.
Well, yeah, I remember Steve was on here last. Hamish, do you remember when Steve was on here last? We talked about what was deemed an acceptable human life cost.
There's several challenges here that there is an element of where a balance is trying to be maintained as to how far can we actually sort of go, and nobody wants to say anything. The government there is rather sort of trapped themselves, because they've actually said they're going to pay a certain amount towards remediation. However, it's totally inadequate compared to everything that's going on. It does need something like the Earl of Lytton's. Something can happen on this building sort of safety scheme. We want that act to sort of get pushed through. Even that in itself won't cover everything that's going on. And bearing in mind, this is the seriousness of it. We're approaching those that we know as getting on for 2 million people who are actually below. They aren't even covered. They aren't even covered in this remediation.
Yes, I don't think people realise this, that the amendments as put ahead only affect buildings of above how many metres?
Was it 18? I can't remember.
It's a relatively small amount, which then leaves all those properties of lower than that still covered in cladding, still open to a fire risk, still not supported.
Actually, I mean, a very, very interesting case down in the West Country. Sort of came about, and they're conventional sort of. They're a bit like sort of maisonettes. They're no taller than that, and they have been declared as being seriously in need of remediation. So,
but it won't be covered by the current scheme because they're too low.
Absolutely. So there's those that we don't know about. I mean, I think this is the biggest challenge as well. We know about some. We're not covered for those. Something does have to. And I think people are just standing back and not wanting to make a decision that's going to actually put anybody or to challenge anybody. And therefore, whilst we have that going on, issues that sort of Steve is actually sort of undergoing, that Royal Artillery Quays, and it won't be the only one, they basically are still having to suffer from some unmerciless sort of, if you like, sort of assaults from all sorts of different sides. Like we say, the insurance, like we say, the management fees. But the other, on top of that, we have had fires within the last 2 months. And as a consequence of that, people have actually been moved out of their flats. And they are stuck in hotels. And for whatever reason, the nobody is actually doing anything particularly sort of quickly to resolve that issue. So there are people all over the place who actually have been moved out of buildings which are deemed to be totally unsafe. There's so much that's, if you like, it's so murky. And they really ought to be setting up a group that specifically looks at that particular side of it, because it will resolve so many issues. And I think what it is, we've got conflict of interest from different sort of parties. The builders themselves, they don't want to admit to too much, because as soon as they start doing something, somebody, right, okay, you can do the whole lot of it then type.
Can open, worms everywhere.
And because of that, the government have got a certain amount, but they keep finding this money. I mean, the weird thing is, it's nothing to do with what we're saying, but somehow the government are finding money to take over responsibility for some trains, and they've just whopped up train drivers' salaries by a massive amount. So they find money from places to suit what their new ideas happen to be. But they haven't actually committed. All they need to do is take some kind of action, because as things stand, Barrett's are in a position to turn around and say, we are meeting government approval.
Yes, it's so nutty. I believe, Silas, from the last time I spoke to Steve, that there is, I guess, a certain amount that is being covered by the current watered down regulations, but it leaves so much open that we're not really addressing the problem, are we?
That certainly appears to be the case, and it certainly feels unfair that if you are a buy-to-let landlord, for example, who has purchased one of these units in good faith to provide a home for somebody else, and you've put a significant amount of your life savings into it, that you are excluded from some kind of remediation. That to me seems very discriminatory, and some people will argue that, well, landlords are rich and they can afford it, so to hell with them. But I think why are they being allowed to get away with it in the first place? And I think there was something very interesting that went around social media this week, if any of you have seen it. It's this whole Bovia scandal.
Yes
A feed additive, and what has surprised me about it is the boycotting by the British public of certain products, particularly from the Arla food industry. And I do wonder whether that's actually the solution. We might be approaching it from the wrong angle here, that we're expecting the government to step in and deal with a problem that in essence they could have solved like that, and they've chosen not to. So is it not now down to the public to boycott Barrett and say, actually, no, we expect, if we're going to put our life savings into a property, that we're going to live there, we're going to raise our family there, we expect it to be safe, and we expect it to be free from harm. And I think
there needs to be a class action of Barrett home owners to Barrett, but also I think it needs to be more general. I think it needs to be all builders of this nature who have left people in this state, because it's, as I said earlier in my opening monologue, Barrett are not the only ones to blame here. There are others that are, dare I say, even worse. Oh my goodness.
It's a horrible thing, isn't it, to think of, that we cannot rely upon builders to do what they should be doing. And why anybody would, in their right minds, would think a cost-cutting measure to make something flammable as opposed to non-flammable would be a good idea is beyond me. But
I mean, I spoke in depth with Michelle, a friend of the show, and who is kind of like the voice of reason in a lot of these things. And she said to me, look, you have to face the fact that all property nowadays is flammable. But what they do is that you've got the fire breaks, you've got the correct fixings, and if you follow the code, then it stops, then it ceases to be an issue. The problem we've got is they cut corners, they use plastic clips, they don't put any fire breaks in, they do a little dab to hold tiles on as opposed to the proper means. They literally don't follow the standards. And I think that's the issue. Hamish, tell me some light at the end of this tunnel, sir?
Well, at this particular moment, no, but I do actually perceive that unless people themselves, individuals, start taking that action. Now, many people are actually caught up in it. So they are in properties now. They cannot afford to leave. They really can't afford to stay there, many of them. And many of them have been taken to court because of the position they've been put in by these particular builders. And if the councils aren't going to take action, those are going to actually buy into new properties that are being developed, or those that become empty, they should be really trying to sort of avoid those that are likely to have the issues. And I think this is the most important thing that we could actually be saying to anybody. We and Steve would certainly sort of stand out and sort of say exactly this. Anybody that's going to buy a flat needs to look at it far, far more deeply. We haven't got our usual experts that can actually sort of give us it, but somebody buying a flat now, it's a wise move to look as deeply as you possibly can. And unfortunately, it is going to prevent the sale of a multitude, like you indicated earlier, Gareth. They're going to remain empty, and it can be difficult. After all, you think about this. Some poor landlord who just bought up one property thing went, "Oh, I'll buy that, and I can basically take somebody off the streets. They're living in this particular property. That person leaves, whatever the reason happens to be, and they've now been told, "Oh, hang on, Mr. Landlord, that place is in serious danger of catching fire." So basically, it's got we can't evict anybody. The fact that it's empty now, would you seriously, as a landlord, because they are really fair people. The majority of landlords, people like to throw mud at them because as sort of intimating that they aren't taken as serious as they deserve to be treated. And have been treated very badly by the last couple of governments in terms of what's actually being imposed upon them. But could you, if you've got a property there and it's got fire risk, would you actually want to put a tenant in there? Would you want to put, somebody in there?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, to be being responsible for the risk to life for another individual, just so you can make a few pennies from them, seems to be disproportionately wrong. I'm going to draw this to a close and just say, look, every week we are here to discuss. These are our own opinions. These are not advice, but this is just an opinion-based show. However, we are drawing your attention to the fact that these issues need to be resolved, and the power is there to resolve them. It just needs the right people to take action. And on that note, let me thank Hamish McClay of Search Convey for his sage opinions, and Sailors J. Lees of keeping us on the straight and narrow. And to all of you out there, thank you for watching. Hopefully, normal service will resume next Friday. But until then, I wish you all the very best. Hope you have a marvelous weekend. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars, and do look after that mental health. Goodbye.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll punch through the moon, but their word always fails.